There was a time when humans feared almost everything. The dark wild animals, starvation the next sunrise. But one day, a completely different kind of fear appeared. A fear that couldn't bite you, couldn't hunt you, couldn't kill you with claws or teeth. Yet somehow, it became one of the most powerful forces in human history, because for the very first time, a human became afraid of what another human thought of them. That moment changed everything. It shaped friendships, built families, cried tribes, started laws, inspired religions. Even today, thousands of years later, it still controls millions of decisions you make without realizing it. But here's the real mystery. When did this emotion actually begin? At what point did early humans stop worrying only about survival and start worrying about how they looked in the eyes of others? No fossil can answer that. No ancient skeleton tells us. No cave painting records the exact moment. Yet modern science gives us clues. Psychology gives us clues. Anthropology gives us clues. And when you connect them together, they point toward one of the most extraordinary moments in human evolution. The birth of shame. Not embarrassment, not guilt, something much deeper. An emotion so uniquely human that it may have separated us from every other animal on Earth, because without shame, there might never have been civilization. No rules, no reputation, no trust, no society as we know it. Today we're going back over 100,000 years to discover how one invisible emotion quietly transformed the human species forever. And by the end of this video, you may never think about your own feelings the same way again. For almost all of Earth's history, survival was simple, not easy. Just simple. Find food. Avoid predators, protect your family, stay alive long enough to see another sunrise. Nothing else really mattered. A lion never cared if another lion respected it. A wolf never lay awake wondering whether the rest of the pack secretly judged it. Animals react to danger. They don't spend hours replaying yesterday's mistakes inside their heads. Early humans weren't very different. More than 100,000 years ago, our ancestors lived in a world where every single day was a fight against nature. A single injury could become a death sentence. One failed hunt meant an empty stomach. One harsh winter could wipe out an entire family. Life moved from one survival problem to the next. But as human intelligence grew, something unexpected happened. Our ancestors stopped paying attention only to the world around them. They began paying attention to each other. Not just their actions, their intentions, their reactions, their opinions. And that tiny change would eventually reshape the human brain forever. Because surviving wasn't only about escaping predators anymore. Now, you also had to survive your own tribe. That sounds strange today. After all, your tribe was supposed to protect you. And it did. But only if you remained valuable. Imagine living with only 40 or 50 people. No cities, no police, no hospitals, no supermarkets. Everything you needed came from those people. They hunted with you, shared food with you, protected your children, defended you from enemies. If they accepted you, you lived. If they rejected you, you probably died. It really was that simple. Which meant something remarkable. Your reputation became almost as important as your heartbeat. If people believed you were selfish, they might stop sharing food. If they believed you were lazy, they might leave you behind during migration. If they thought you couldn't be trusted, they might never hunt beside you again. And hunting alone in prehistoric Africa was almost impossible. So evolution faced a completely new challenge. How do you stop people from damaging the group? You could punish them afterward, but by then, the damage might already be done. Instead, nature developed something far more powerful, a warning system, not for broken bones, not for hungry stomachs, but for damaged relationships, an invisible alarm that whispered, "Careful, you're about to lose the people you need most." That alarm was shame. It didn't exist to make people miserable. It existed to keep them connected. Long before laws, before kings, before religion, before written rules, there was already something policing human behavior. It lived inside the mind. And every time someone crossed the line, it switched on. But this raises an even bigger mystery. How could the brain possibly know what someone else was thinking? How could one human look into another person's face and suddenly imagine the judgment happening inside their mind? That ability changed everything. Because the moment humans learned to see themselves through someone else's eyes, they became something no other creature had ever truly become: self-aware. And that's where the real story begins. For millions of years, animals could watch the world. Humans learned to watch themselves. That sounds simple. It isn't. Think about what has to happen inside a brain before shame becomes possible. First, you need to understand that another person has a mind, not just eyes, not just a body, a mind with thoughts, opinions, and judgments. Then you need to imagine what that mind is thinking about you. And finally, you need to care. That is an astonishing cognitive achievement. Modern psychologists call this theory of mind. The ability to understand that other people have perspectives separate from your own. Babies don't have it. Very young children don't fully have it. But around the age of 3 or 4, something changes. A child suddenly realizes, other people can think about me. And almost immediately after that realization appears, so does shame. Researchers have observed children hiding their faces after making mistakes, lowering their heads, turning away, trying to disappear, not because they fear punishment, because they fear being seen differently. Now, imagine that same transition happening in human evolution. At some point, our ancestors developed brains sophisticated enough to model the thoughts of others. Suddenly, social life became much more complicated. A hunter could no longer think only about the hunt. He had to think about what the others expected, whether he had done his share, whether the group trusted him, whether his failure would damage his reputation. For the first time in history, a human mind became both the actor and the audience. Neuroscientists have identified several brain regions involved in this process. The medial prefrontal cortex helps us think about ourselves. The insula is involved in social pain. The posterior cingulate cortex helps process how we are evaluated by others. These areas became dramatically more developed in humans than in our closest animal relatives. Shame and civilization were not separate inventions. They grew together, because once humans could imagine how they appeared to others, they began managing that appearance. They wore symbols, followed rituals, protected their reputation, created social rules. And gradually, those rules became culture. Chimpanzees can deceive each other. They can hide food. They can manipulate rivals. But there is little evidence that a chimpanzee lies awake replaying a social mistake and feeling diminished by what others think. Humans do, constantly. That recursive loop, I know that I did something wrong, appears to be uniquely human. And once that loop existed, shame became unavoidable. The brain had learned to watch itself being watched, even when nobody was looking. But if shame was powerful enough to shape the human mind, could it also have shaped human civilization itself? That is where the story becomes even more surprising, because the next step isn't about psychology anymore. It's about how an invisible emotion helped build laws, religion, art, and the entire structure of organized society. And it all started with one simple question. What happens when a group begins judging the people inside it? Nobody knows the name of the first human who truly felt shame. No bones can tell us. No cave painting records it. History stayed completely silent. But science allows us to imagine what that moment may have looked like, not as fantasy, but as one of the most likely turning points in human evolution. Picture a small hunting group, maybe 40 people. They've spent hours tracking a large animal across the open savanna. Everyone depends on this hunt. Children haven't eaten properly for days. The elderly are weak. Failure isn't disappointing. It's deadly. One hunter gets impatient. Instead of waiting for the signal, he throws his spear too early. The animal bolts. Within seconds, the entire hunt is over. Hours of work gone. The group slowly turns toward him. Nobody speaks. They don't need to. Their faces say everything: disappointment, frustration, doubt. And in that single moment, something happens inside his mind. Not physical pain, not fear of a predator, a different kind of pain. His heart begins racing. His stomach tightens. His face grows hot. He avoids eye contact. Every instinct tells him the same thing: leave. Hide. Disappear. That feeling is remarkably familiar, because thousands of generations later, your brain still reacts almost exactly the same way. Today, you might feel it after saying something embarrassing, after making a mistake at work, after being laughed at, after realizing everyone in the room noticed your failure. Your body reacts as if your survival is under threat. And in a strange way, your brain isn't wrong, because it was designed for a completely different world. A world where losing the respect 40 people could actually mean death. Scientists call this social pain. What's fascinating is that brain scans reveal something extraordinary. The same neural circuits activated during physical pain also become active during social rejection. Your brain doesn't treat rejection as a small inconvenience, it treats it as a survival emergency. Think about that. An emotion created over 100,000 years ago is still running inside your head today. Completely automatically, completely silently. Every awkward conversation, every embarrassing memory, every moment you wonder, what do people think about me? You're activating an ancient survival system, one that evolved long before cities, long before technology, long before the modern world ever existed. But here's where the story becomes even more fascinating. That painful feeling didn't just protect individuals, it transformed entire groups. Because once everyone feared losing their reputation, people naturally started following shared expectations. They shared food more fairly. They became more trustworthy. They cooperated instead of constantly competing. Over thousands of generations, those unwritten expectations slowly became traditions. Traditions became customs. Customs became laws, and eventually, they became civilizations. In other words, before humans built cities, they first built something invisible, a shared sense of right and wrong. And shame was one of the strongest forces holding it together. But every powerful tool has a dark side. The same emotion that helped humans cooperate could also be used to control them.